So once again, welcome to the Buddhist Fellowship. It's been years since you stepped in, Jetsunma. And it's our great fortune and blessing to have you tonight with us. Okay, without further ado, we are going to review these questions, okay, in no particular order. It's no particular order. Should I go in sequence?
No, not at all. Surprise me.
Right. Okay, the first question on the list. I should ask the question on renunciation first. Okay. First question on the list. If one wishes to start out a monastic life and is geared towards forest monastic life, where or how should I start out?
Well, I suppose if one is geared towards the forest monastic life, then it would be better to start off where there are forest monastics, which presumably is more likely to be in Thailand. In Thailand, of course, they have a sangha of foreign monastics, and they also have monasteries purely for foreigners, which might actually be a lot easier to start with than trying to join a native monastic like Burma or Thailand, where only people speak Burmese or Thai, and that they are not acclimatized to dealing with foreigners such as yourselves. So I would say if you're really interested in joining into a forest monastic order, then you should go to Thailand, where now they have organized it very nicely for foreigners in northeast Thailand. And maybe first get in contact with people like Ajahn Brahm and others who are, or used to be, part of that order, and so would have the information necessary to understand its its strong points and its limitations.
I think there's no gender to this question.
Well, I mean, I assume they have nuns too. Certainly they have monks, but I assume they have a nun order as well. Of course, nuns in Thailand it's a very excellent exercise in humility for any woman who thinks that she has any voice at all in the Buddhist world, because the Meitchis in Thailand are, well, basically they're the lowest of the low. And it's very, very sad because so many Meitchis are really beautiful, beautiful women, but they are very disregarded in that society. So any woman that wants to go to Thailand and ordain, as I say, it is indeed, unless they join someone like bhikṣuṇī Dhammananda, who is not part of the forest tradition, but within the forest tradition, then definitely women are kept in their place, which is down on the ground with the ants.
Well, it's changing too. I think in Dhammasara in Perth, in Australia, a female nuns monastery is...
this is true. I mean, I was just thinking in terms of a traditional forest, but of course in Australia this is very true. Now the basic forest tradition is being carried on in a different context, where women now are being allowed to be recognized as equal on the Dharma path. So perhaps for educated Singaporeans, it might be easier to start out in a more just easier kind of atmosphere in which to start, because the traditional Thai approach, while producing many very great masters, is somewhat challenging for the females.
Right. Thank you for answering that question. The next question. It's written by someone who says that he or she has been struggling to want to let go of lay life as each day passes, working, having fun, at the same time contemplating about what there is to life. And this question is, how do you know it is time to let go of lay life completely?
To me, it seems that comes a point when you just know. When we talk about renunciation, I think it's very important to recognize that you're not letting go of anything that you want. And if you still want it, maybe you should work a little harder on the idea of why do you want it. I mean, an example is like if you have a small child has like a cuddly toy, like a teddy bear, and that child is terribly attached to their toy, even if the toy to other people only has one eye and is, you know, an arm hanging off and is really scruffy, but the child loves it desperately. And if we take away that toy from the child, saying, now it's time you grew up, you shouldn't be playing with these toys anymore, be a big boy or a big girl, it will hurt the child, because the child is so attached still to that toy. But as the child grows up, naturally its interest in that toy will disappear. They'll stick it in the cupboard and forget all about it. They don't want it anymore. They've outgrown it. And so the Buddha called all us ordinary beings the childish, because we are like children attached to our toys. And the Buddhist path is a path of maturing, of growing up, of becoming adults. And as we grow up, so we lose interest in the games and toys of a child. It's not a renunciation in the sense of getting rid of something that we really are love. We just lose interest. We don't care about that anymore. You know, if somebody gave it to us, we wouldn't want it. Like a tree, you know, in the fullness, if you pull the leaves, there's a lot of resistance. But come autumn, the leaves of themselves begin to change and fall off. There's no holding on there. It's just natural. And so to my mind, really, genuine renunciation is simply when we have outgrown our childish ways. And then it doesn't feel like renunciation, it feels like freedom. Oh, thank goodness. Until that comes, maybe one is not ready. If one leaves the so-called worldly life with regret and thinking back to all the things you're missing, you're not ready yet.
I think there's a lot of curiosity in your life because you have been inspiring us. Because the next question, also about renunciation, it's from someone who says that he or she is 36 this year and wondered if it's too old, and especially when this person has just developed a back problem. So the question is there an age too old to begin a monastic life?
No. Essentially not. In many traditional Buddhist countries, after the family has grown up and left home, then the husband and the wife dedicate their lives to their spiritual practice. Let us remember that the first Buddhist nun was Mahaprajapati Gautami, who was the Buddha's aunt and stepmother. And the Buddha by this time was already in his 30s, so she must have been at least in her 50s or 60s. And I think one of the main reasons why the Buddha hesitated to give her ordination was because she was a court lady, you know, used to very tender upbringing, and also she was no longer so young, and he probably felt it was too difficult for her, because at that time there were no nuns, there were no monasteries, there were no nunneries. Everybody lived out in the forest and begged for alms. And so I think the Buddha's initial resistance was thinking, how can this lady do it, you know? But she was very determined, and Ananda was very pushing, and eventually the Buddha, of course, agreed and ordained her and her 500 court ladies, and they were the foundation of the nuns' order. So probably most of those were not young. And they were highly successful, and many of them gained great realizations, great learning. The Buddha praised them for their abilities in teaching and so forth, and their abilities in meditation, in understanding the Dharma. And so I don't think that there is, 36 is quite young. I mean, it's not as young as in a traditional place where now some of our nuns are 4 years old. But nonetheless, for the advantage of joining the order there are advantages and disadvantages. And one of the advantages is that one is not only comes to the order highly educated, but also with life's experience behind. So that probably if someone, you know, somewhat older and middle-aged and so forth, becomes a monk or a nun, they're not interested in worldly life anymore. They've had that. Whereas if you start when you're very, very young, there's always that temptation out there glittering, because you don't know, you never experienced it. So maybe, you know? But if one has already gone through that, one knows that that was okay, but that wasn't what one wants anymore. And so one is therefore already, to a certain extent, ahead of the game. And one is then able to focus one's life on study and practice and benefiting the Dharma in many ways. So I really don't think that, certainly 36 is not old. The mind is still very young. Maybe they should practice yoga or go and see an acupuncturist or something for their back. Because certainly in a traditional setting, there's a lot of sitting and kneeling. And so they should get their back seen to first.
Yeah. So there are quite a few people who are very interested to become a nun or a monk. So yeah, perhaps that'll be good. Next question. Is it possible to attain enlightenment without being a nun?
The mind does not take ordination. And it is the mind which gains enlightenment. So merely shaving your head, putting on robes, doesn't change the mind, as people who shave their heads and put on robes soon discover. The reason people receive ordination, or at least one of the reasons, is because by becoming a monk or a nun, it cuts out a lot of distraction, and it allows one to focus one's attention on the Dharma, on study and practice. And because one does not have intimate relationships, so therefore the emotions one can work on the emotions more easily, attachment being one of the primary causes of dukkha. And because one doesn't have an outside profession, one has time for study and practice. This is the advantage of the monastic life. However, as I say, the point is that it is the mind which will gain realization. And one can be a monk or a nun with a totally distracted mind, I assure you. Or one could be a lay person with a very focused, mindful mind. So the point is that during the day, whether one is with one's family, whether one is with in one's workplace, whether one is dealing with one's social life, how focused, how aware are we? How mindful are we? This is the question. It's really ultimately not a matter of lay or monastic. It's a matter of what are we doing with our mind. To help as lay people, we cannot expect that if we are spending all our time, partying or watching television or going to movies or just running around the whole time, that we are going to then at the same time have a mind which is quiet and focused. Whether lay or monastic, there has to be some letting go. And if one is serious, then one definitely has to simplify one's life. One has to decide what is important, what is not important, what distracts the mind, and what brings the mind into focus. Because, one cannot just lead an ordinary life and then expect to be enlightened also. It just doesn't work. If one wants to really gain spiritual progress in a lay life, which is perfectly possible, even in the time of the Buddha, I mean, he had, disciples who were businessmen, housewives, prostitutes, all sorts. He didn't tell them to give up their way of life. And yet they gained very high levels of realization. But it's the quality of the mind that counts. And so one has to frame one's life so that it supports one's practice. Not that, you do a 10-day retreat and you're all nice and calm, and then you come back and you just throw yourself back into the usual worldly, curriculum again. Then you say, oh, all my meditation went. But we have to take mindfulness, we have to take awareness, we have to take ethics, generosity, patience, loving kindness, all these qualities into our daily life and make our daily life our practice. If we divide the two and say, when I'm in the temple, in the Dharma center, when I'm sitting on my meditation cushion, that's Dharma practice. The rest of the time with my family, at work, in my social life, that's worldly activity. Then we will never get anywhere. Because worldly activity is so much, our little Dharma practice is so little. So therefore, we have to really seriously consider how to merge the Dharma and our daily life. And recognize that all the people that we meet are not the obstacles to our practice, they are the opportunities to our practice. Because practice isn't just meditation. Practice is cultivating loving kindness, compassion, tolerance, forbearance, generosity, kindliness, as well as being aware and focused. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it's possible. I mean, many of the greatest teachers in Tibet were not monks. They were family people. They had children, they had endless family, they were traditional doctors, or, they had some kind of work which they served the community with, but they were also great Dharma teachers. And they didn't give up being family just because of practicing the Dharma. But it is more difficult because the distractions are great. And we are in the habit of being distracted. So therefore, we really should, if you are serious, then you have to structure your life not to. Also be careful what input we put into our lives. You know, people turn on television, they watch all this stuff just coming in. A lot of it is complete junk. And also is designed to arouse the negative emotions, our klesha. So we should be very careful what we put into our mind. I mean, on one hand we're trying to purify our mind and at the same time bringing in all this pollution. So again, really, if one is serious, this questioner, if they are serious, yes, of course you can be enlightened. But it's really hard, even if you're in the most perfect environment, it's still hard to get enlightened. I mean, very few people get enlightened with capital E radiating lights. But you can certainly gain insights, you can certainly gain realizations, you can certainly make progress on the path and live to benefit yourself and others, so that at the time of death, you can feel, yes, I made use of this life, this human life. I didn't waste it. And I used my human life to benefit myself and to benefit others. And that was a life well lived. That's what you have to aim for. Forget enlightenment. Just be a nicer person. That's already a challenge.
Very good. Very nice answer, because that answer would also answer the other question, which is how do we practice without stopping as laypersons with the layperson's preoccupations and concerns? Because every time after a retreat, the peace and happiness will stay for a while, and then it will wear off as we move back into the mundane world. Yeah?
Exactly that. So I think we must listen to what did the Buddha say. The Buddha said mindfulness, awareness. Really, as much as possible, being conscious of what we are doing while we're doing it, and being conscious of what's going on in our mind. The Tibetans are very insistent on the importance of observing the mind. Of course, they say observe the mind at all times, which is really very difficult. But one can observe the mind as much as one can. When I first started, it was suggested that 3 times in each hour, one just turn the attention back onto the mind. In this moment, what is the mind thinking? Where is the mind dwelling? Not judging it, but really looking, so that we become more and more accustomed to being present in our mind, and not just letting the mind run all over the place. And this also helps us very much even in our work, because a lot of our stress is not caused by the actual work, it's caused by the fact that our mind is in all different directions and is wild, basically. I mean, the Buddha, as you know, compared the mind to a mad monkey. Well, I mean, what he would say nowadays. So, I mean, this monkey leaping all over the place, grasping whatever it feels like, jumping around. If anybody has ever seen monkeys in the wild, you will know that they spend all their time eating, fighting, and copulating. And that pretty much sums up many people's minds. So, you know, we have to look at our mind, because, as I say, it's the mind which will carry us on the path. So after doing a practice and retreat, then to take the essence of that and really merge it with one's daily life. Otherwise, it's not going to work. Our habit of being distracted is so strong that it takes really a lot of work to create another habit, which is the habit of being mindful. What can I say? I mean, people think it's all just like this. You know, you sit down, you meditate, and then voila, you know, you're a Maha Bodhisattva or an Arahat. It doesn't work like that. I mean, everyone knows that even if you want to master a musical instrument or you want to master a sport, then it takes, you know, they say at the minimum 10,000 hours of practice to become proficient in a skill. And that's just kicking a ball or twiddling your fingers. What to speak of mastering the mind? So don't think this is something which is so easy. It's not easy. The resistance is very, very strong. And it's like we're trying to, how can I say, it's like we're trying to get into outer space, right? We're trying to transcend. Then when you send a rocket ship, then the initial thrust is enormous amount of fuel and energy to thrust that spaceship into outer space. Once it's in outer space, it doesn't need anything. It all drops off and it free flies. You need just a minimum amount. But to get it beyond the gravitational pull takes enormous amounts of energy. And our minds are very much under the influence of the gravitational worldly pull back into our ordinary habitual tendencies. And it takes an enormous amount of energy and determination to go beyond that and to really get a glimpse of the transcendental. Then once you have done that, then it's much more subtle. But at the beginning, it takes a lot of effort, a lot of determination. Really, I'm sorry. This is, it's not so easy. But it's the only thing ultimately which is worthwhile. It's the one thing which won't let you down if you really give it all you've got.
Right. I think it's also connected to the next question, which is it necessary for one to have a spiritual teacher for guidance, or can one practice on their own after reading up on Dhamma books?
Well, you know, if you want to master any skill, as I say, if you want to be a musician, if you want to be a sports person, you need a trainer. You know, you need someone who themselves have developed that particular skill to a much greater degree. Why? Because, yes, you can read instruction manuals, but the instruction manual is not going to tell you when you've gone wrong. And the instruction manual is not going to demonstrate how to do it right or to encourage you. So, yes, it is very, very helpful to have personal guidance. It's not so easy to find a good guide. I mean, I could go on forever about the problems of finding a good teacher. But, you know, you don't need a fully enlightened Buddha. I mean, that would be nice, but... but what you do need is someone who at least has some idea. I mean, if you were going to go trekking in unknown territory, you would need a guide who knew where they were going, not just someone who had read the book, right, or was looking at the map. You would feel much more confident going through the desert with someone who actually knew, because they themselves had reached that goal and could come back and show you this is the path. Don't go that way, go this way. And so, although, as I say, we don't need normally someone who is extraordinarily advanced, but someone who does have some confidence in the practice because they themselves have practiced and achieved something, you know, enough to give them confidence that this is the way, can be very, very helpful, undoubtedly. Beyond that, of course, we also have to trust in our own innate wisdom, but to have someone to refer to, even not all the time. I mean, for example, to go, you hear that there's someone giving a retreat who you heard was a very good teacher. Then you could just go for a retreat with that person, clear away your doubts, ask questions, and then go away and practice. Because, you know, you don't have to sit opposite the teacher the whole time. The teacher, however brilliant, cannot do the practice for you. In the end, we have to do the practice. But to have someone who can indicate the correct way to practice so that we know and we have the confidence to practice in this way can be very, very helpful. Because otherwise, what happens is that if we try to guide our own spiritual path, we choose the bits we like. And maybe those aren't the bits which are best for us. It's very difficult for us to judge ourselves very clearly. What would be beneficial, what would not be beneficial. Sometimes things which we think is the last thing we want to do is actually the very thing which we should be doing. It's hard for us to judge. And this is where a very skilled teacher could help us. So on the whole, yes. But in the meantime, also don't just wait until the perfect guru arrives and clicks his fingers and it all manifests. Because even if the perfect Buddha himself was sitting before you, all he could say was practice, right? So a lot of basic practices. I would suggest that if you're interested, then you should definitely do at least 1 or 2 guided retreats. So you know how to practice, and you get the discipline of practicing together. And then just go away and do it, you know. And then really, you know, if your heart is sincere and you really pray to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, as you need it, teachers will appear.
All these answers are well connected. Because the next question is also in line with what you just said. How do we know that a meditation practice is on the right path, especially if we have only attended 1 or 2 retreats a year?
Well, basically, I mean, it's you know, different people are different, so one cannot make an overall judgment. But on the whole, if one feels that one's mind is becoming clearer, more focused, and one's heart is becoming more open and kinder, then you're probably on the right path. Paldanatisha, who was a great Bengali scholar who went to Indonesia to learn from great masters in Indonesia during a time when Indonesia was a Buddhist country in the 11th century. He says that the criteria to judge whether one's meditation is successful or not is whether one's afflictive emotions, one's greed, anger, pride, jealousy, and so forth, have increased, decreased, or stayed the same. And he says if they have increased, we're more irritable than we ever were, or more full of desires and distractions, or proud of ourselves because now we're meditators. If our afflictive emotions have increased or stayed the same, then the meditation is not working. If our afflictive desires, our negative emotions have decreased, then that is a sign that something inside is working. So we ourselves often cannot tell whether or not our negative emotions are decreased. But if your family tell you, you're ever so much nicer nowadays, what are you doing? You might assume you're on the right track. But if you're more difficult to live with than ever, then I would wonder.
Right, so moving on. The next question is, how do you know what's your purpose this lifetime?
Well, our purpose in this lifetime should be to awaken and then awaken others. That's our ultimate purpose. Our relative purpose would depend on what we feel to be our own inner calling. I mean, different people have, some people feel that their purpose in life is to help the sick, or some people feel that their purpose in life is to educate the young, or whatever. I mean, you cannot say, how do we know what our purpose in life is? What is meaningful for you? But I do feel that it would always be something which would not only benefit ourselves, but be very much of benefit to others. Because ultimately we are thinking of the happiness of others. If we are only targeting our own happiness, we will end up feeling very dissatisfied. But if with a very soothed, balanced, healthy sense of self, before we get enlightened and realize there's no self, that we are really concerned with bringing well-being and happiness to others, then that would give us a purpose in life, whatever form that might take. I mean, it's not just one purpose in life, apart from the ultimate. What is meaningful for you? You know, what talents do you have? What can you do to contribute to your society? That could be your purpose.
Yeah, the next person actually asked something similar, which is, I give joy and I see happiness and laughter in others. I feel satisfied and peaceful, but not overly overwhelmed with joy. So the question is, what is happiness? How should I manage this?
Well, you know, there are, of course, two forms of happiness. There is hedonic happiness, which means the happiness which comes from pleasure, right? You have something good to eat, or you're with your family having a celebration, or you know, something good happens, and you feel a kind of happiness, a kind of joy. But that, of course, is very short-lived, usually, and also is very, you know, you're eating good food, which is a pleasure, but then if you keep having to eat and eat and eat and eat, that pleasure turns into pain. And so it's a very uncertain form of external happiness depending on others. But genuine happiness doesn't depend on others, and it doesn't depend on external circumstances. It depends on a kind of inner joy that wells up within, which normally is associated with having a clear and peaceful mind. When the mind is at peace and the sense of self has receded, because internally one is feeling in balance and well, then this sense of inner joy springs up. And this is on a very different level from the kind of hedonic pleasure which comes just from the senses. This is not dependent on the senses at all. It's dependent only on a sense of inner well-being and inner balance. So this is why during meditation, when then the psychic or the psychological factors are in balance, then all these different levels of joy appear in the mind, because the inner mind is in a state of healthiness. And that inner healthiness, that psychological healthiness, gives rise to a very deep sense of happiness, which then spills over and wants to extend to all beings. Does that answer that question?
Does that answer the question? I think so. Yeah. I think you also touched on doing good for others, right? The next question is about when one is doing good for others, example, charity work, one feels good. This feeling of goodness could become the desire of an individual and may become a tool to feed one's own ego. So how do we seek the middle path when we are doing humanitarian or charity work?
You know, I think we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves. It is important that while we are conscious of the defects in our mind, of our greed and our anger and our pride and so forth, and we strive to deal with these in a skillful way and transform them, nonetheless, at the same time, the Buddha also recommended that we rejoice in our goodness. That not in a prideful way, but it's like if you've got a garden, if you're cultivating a garden, then of course one has to pay attention to the weeds and pull out the weeds. But we also have to water the flowers and fertilize them. I mean, the garden is not just a matter of just pulling out weeds. If we ignore the beautiful flowers there, then and we don't bother to water them, I mean, what have we got a garden for if not to admire the beautiful flowers? And so likewise, you know, although we are very conscious of our faults and dealing with especially our most difficult character traits is really the path, you know, how to use the difficulties in our mind to transform those into positive qualities. At the same time, we have to be conscious of the good things we do and encourage ourselves. So if we do charity work and things like this, we can be glad that we do charity work. It doesn't mean we have to be proud. It's, you know, but we have to encourage ourselves. If we are always putting ourselves down every time, you know, we feel that we did something well done, then in the end we just end up depressed. And that's not the point. Or we feel burned out, you know, because we are always, we're not nurturing ourselves. So it's very important if we are doing good things to dedicate the merit of that for all beings and to say, you know, whatever goodness I have done, may that be for the benefit of all beings. May all beings be well and happy. Not keep it just for myself like a kind of merit bank account. But at the same time, to encourage ourselves, you know, well, yes, that's well done. Now, what better can I do? You know, so that we are always, you know, going forward. The amount one does is so small compared to what so many other people are doing, so that keeps us modest. But at the same time, you know, it's very important to have confidence in our own essential ability to be of benefit to others. Because otherwise, as I say, you know, if we're always just focusing in every time we feel okay about ourselves, we're slapping ourselves, you know, that is actually not a Buddhist approach, to be honest. The Buddha felt that we needed to recognize the goodness in ourselves as well as to recognize the faults. and not worry too much. I mean, only if we become arrogant and really proud and obnoxious, then of course that's a problem. But for normally just to recognize that we're doing our best and we're trying to help, that's perfectly valid. It's true, you're trying to help. Good, well done, keep going, do more.
So I have 2 more questions left on this list. The next question is, how do we forgive someone? Do we need to tell the person, I've forgiven you, even if he or she has not asked for forgiveness? Or do we just go to the Buddha and silently say that I have forgiven him or her?
Well, I certainly don't think you need to go to somebody and say obnoxiously, oh, I have forgiven you. No. The important thing is to decide whether one has really forgiven, and to be very honest with oneself. Because if one still feels lingering resentment and pretending one is forgiving because you have to be forgiving, then that doesn't work. When one has genuinely forgiven someone, there is a sense of inner release, a sense of openness and spaciousness, and that you feel that something you've been carrying around with you, like a rucksack of rocks, has fallen off, and there's a feeling of lightness. You don't need to tell anyone. The Buddhas know already, and all you need is just that sense of inner release, and then just go on.
Well, the last question is, I think, on the top of most of our minds, which is, what would your advice be for someone contemplating staying in a cave for a period of time?
Well, first you put an advertisement in the Singapore Straits Times for a nice air-conditioned cave with all mod con. You know, there's nothing magical about caves, to be quite honest. Most caves are damp and are likely to give you rheumatism. And often also they are not close to a water source. So there's nothing intrinsically transforming about a cave. I mean, caves are good insofar as you don't have to build them. And they have a quality because you are very connected with the earth. But in itself, probably a nice, well-constructed retreat hut would be more practical. Why do they want to live in a cave?
You inspired us after 12 years. Why did you live in a cave for 12 years?
Well, because I happened to find a very good cave in exactly the right kind of place. Lahul itself is a Buddhist area. And the cave, despite being damp for much of the year, was nonetheless in a very quiet place. And yeah, at the time I couldn't think of anywhere better to be, so I stayed on. But when I was going to go and stay in the cave, my Lama asked 3 questions. Well, first, of course, this was in the Himalayas. So he asked, first of all, does it face south? Because it's very important to get sun. You know, if it faces north, you'll freeze to death. Does it face south? Is it dry? And there was another question. Anyway, basically, I thought it was dry, because when I went to see it was the dry season. Then later I discovered. But honestly, I mean, staying in caves is very nice insofar as they are unconstructed, so that has a very special quality. But the most important, the Buddha said, no, Milarepa said, that the Buddha said we should develop a cave and forest mind wherever you go. So whether you're in the town or whether you're up in the mountains, you should keep a cave and forest mind. In other words, the mind should be as if you were in a cave. I mean, like, you know, focused and aware and alert and so forth, wherever. The Tibetans have a saying that body in the cave, mind in the bazaar. And I think that this is the problem, you know, to have a body in the cave and the mind in the cave along with it is probably rarer than you would think. So just getting the body in the cave is not enough. One needs the mind in the cave along with it. So, but as I say, caves in themselves are... monkeys and bears live in caves. I mean, you know, I don't know that it gets them any closer to enlightenment. It's not the cave that counts. It's the mind that goes there.
So we thank Jetsunma for answering all these 12 questions with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Perhaps I might be asked permission if we could open the floor for more questions, if you've got another 10 minutes.
Okay. Does anybody have any more questions?
We would now open the floor for further questions. Anyone? Comments? Rare opportunity, many years.
Oh, we could all sit and meditate. Wouldn't that be nice? I think enough talking.
Okay. Right.
So I'm sure that all of you have your meditation methods, but in general the important thing is just to keep the mind very relaxed and spacious, but at the same time very focused on the breath or on the thoughts or whatever is your object of meditation. It's very important to understand that our thinking mind, our discursive thinking, is not a problem. We are not aiming to stop the thinking mind, but at this point we are simply ignoring it. It's as if one was in a room with the television on, but one was reading a book or engrossed in one's computer or whatever. In other words, the focus of the attention is not on the television in the background, right? That is ignored, and where the focus is, that is where the mind, the mindfulness of the mind rests. The thinking mind cannot meditate. In meditation, we develop the quality of awareness, which is not the thinking mind. So in focusing on the breath or on the thoughts themselves, one is developing this quality of separating from the thinking mind. Normally, the thinking mind, like a river, we are just completely immersed and swept away by our thoughts, by our feelings. Now we are standing apart, allowing the river to run by, but we are not giving it attention. Our attention is on the breath or on the stream of the thoughts. So just leave, don't tense the mind, don't stress the mind, relax and be attentive. That's all we have to do. If we are focusing on the breath, really, we breathe and we know we're breathing. That's all we have to do. If the mind obtrudes and we get caught up in thinking again, notice it, leave it, go back to the object of meditation. It's very simple, very simple. Just relax and rest the attention on your object of meditation. So just for 10 minutes we sit.